is special assistant to Justin Cummings. She's his representative on the Planning Commission. Her focus has been on emergency preparedness, tobacco policy, issues facing women and children. Before joining Justin's team, she taught at the UCSC Politics and Legal Studies Department. She had also staffed, did work for elected officials in Oakland and Alameda. And she has a BA from UC Santa Barbara and MA and PhD from UCSC with a focus on political institutions and economy. Her dissertation was on national security, homeland security, and policy impacts of counterterrorism at the local level. So Trina's going to take over. Screen sharing.
Well, good evening, everyone. How are you doing? It's great to see a lot of you in person and see you on Zoom or seeing emails. It's so good to be in this school. It's my first time applying to the school.
Okay, is that showing up on the screen? Okay, here's the Trina's slides. And you can advance.
Okay. So yeah, my name is Trina Barton, and I'm happy to be here today. So we're going to talk about low impact camping areas. LICAs, call them LICAs. I'll talk about definitions, the LICA timeline, our remaining concerns, and some next steps. So a picture says 1,000 words, of course. Here are some actual LICAs happening in Santa Cruz County. These pictures are taken from Hip Camp, which is a private platform, kind of like Airbnb, where you can pick dates that you want to book a campsite, and you can register and get those. So these are Felton, Scotts Valley, Aptos, Bonnie Doon, Watsonville. You can see in all these pictures there are grills. Here are some more pictures. So tents in different places. You can see this is rural area. Here, a little friend came to visit the salamander in what looks to be a cabin, a yurt. So what's a LICA and what's SOPA? A LICA is defined in proposed legislation. President Pro Tem Mike McGuire has a Senate Bill 620, and that is currently in Assembly Appropriations Committee, which it's been parked there since last August. So we don't know if it's going anywhere, but that's where it is. And this is where we get low impact camping areas.
Doesn't it have to move out of committee by the end of the week?
Yeah, well, I think the session ends August 31st, but Sandy, would it have to move out of?
I think it has to be out of committee long before that, but I could be wrong. I'll check.
So I've talked to Senator Laird's staff, his legislative folks, and also Assemblymember Pellerin, and they can't tell me for sure whether or not it's dead or whether it could come back as what they call a zombie bill. But be that as it may, this is where we get the definition of low impact camping. So it means any area of private property that provides for the transient occupancy rental of a temporary sleeping accommodation for recreational purposes that's not a commercial lodging facility. And it has these requirements. So 14 consecutive nights, maximum 28 nights, 9 or less campsites, no on-street parking. It complies with applicable state and local fire safety requirements. It pays a transient occupancy tax, provides for human waste disposal, trash disposal, maintains quiet hours, complies with applicable local requirements as well. That's zoning, permitting, lot size, setback requirements, and a property manager. This is a kicker. Property manager is available 24/7 by phone, but not on Sunday. So What SOPA is, on the other hand, is the state law that regulates this currently. So right now, state law dictates this, and SB 620 would look to remove these kind of campsites, the low impact campgrounds, from SOPA entirely. So special occupancy park is a recreational vehicle park, a temporary recreational vehicle park, incidental camping area, tent camp. And as you can see, SOPA is triggered by 2 or more campsites. So anything with 2 or more campsites is regulated under the state law. And this is a discretionary permit process. So it requires to go through a HCD process. It's a conditional use permit. It requires public hearing, CEQA review.
Is the camp under SOPA?
Well, so technically these kind of campgrounds are regulated under SOPA.
So they are.
Well, I think they're just kind of the Wild West, right? I think they're just doing their thing. So I'm not, they're right now,
How do they not get? How do they define the town?
that I don't know.
No
We have to ask-
enforcement.
There's no
No
enforcement.
enforcement.
So there's, Hip Camp has been instrumental in writing SB 620. They're also working very closely with District 2 staff to write the county ordinance as well. So,
Can I
county,
interject for a second?
yes,
So as many of you know, Airbnb, those are kind of, Hipcamp is the company where if you have one of these types of campsites, you register with them, and then they're the ones who advertise and let the
You
revenue.
register there.
With
So
Hipcamp.
Hipcamp is the Airbnb of this type.
So they're not making decisions, state or local.
I think we're gonna hear more.
Is TOT being collected from these sites?
Two.
Todd. It's
No,
being
it's
collected.
not. No,
I don't
right.
believe it is.
I would recommend letting her get through the
These,
presentation.
these are all great questions, right? There's a lot of moving parts here and a lot that we're still learning. So the county like an ordinance, county defines it in the ordinance draft currently as a small scale, low intensity campground rented out for a short term. It mirrors much of the language of SB 620, a maximum of 14 consecutive nights per camper. All of this, no on-street parking, no campfires, although now cook stoves are okay. No on-site manager required. Generators are allowed between 10 and 8. And these campgrounds are allowed in high fire severity zones. That slide didn't come through, but this is our county code continued. So these are some more details of the county code. I'm sorry, the county ordinance is being proposed. So there are density requirements. There's a maximum of 1 campsite per acre. Within these zoning districts only. There's some setbacks that are provided from adjacent property lines, coastal bluffs, on-site residence, agricultural activity, etc. It requires a county code change. So currently there is a discretionary review process for these kinds of campgrounds. And so it would require a change to a ministerial one. So we'll move it from that. And then of course, that brings us to the environmental clearance process. So this was added recently in the last, for the last planning commission meeting. And this, I had troubled the idea that there was inadequate CEQA review. That was problematic for us. So they put in this environmental clearance process. I asked staff to walk us through exactly what that would look like on the ground. And so this was what staff provided, that an applicant fills out a clearance form, a zoning clearance form. The applicant includes what they know about their property and the site. The staff reviews the site, not in person, but using GIS software. And they go through various layers from, the GIS, and they would look at biotic reserves, water resources, land use, including agricultural, archaeological resources, and existing conservation easements. So staff can either clear it at that point or flag it. And if it gets flagged, environmental staff would then go out to the site, and staff might require a biotic report or suggest mitigations. And then it gets kicked up to an administrative use permit process. And that staff said is a little bit discretionary, but it's abbreviated still. Staff could determine at that point if mitigations would work, or they could determine that a full CEQA analysis would be required at that point. So this clearance process, again, it's still ministerial. It provides a little more environmental review, but to me, it didn't seem sufficient. So just wanted to flag that. It just kind of as a really brief little recap here. So for SOPA, for the Special Occupancy Park Act, the current state law, it allows one campsite before that the county can regulate before SOPA is triggered. So the county can currently regulate one campsite with 4 guests. That's it. If SB 620 passes, then we'd be able to regulate 9 campsites per campground with a total of 36. So 4 folks per campsite. County LICA mirrors that, but we provide it has to be a 5-acre minimum parcel. So if you think
I'm having a
about,
hard time hearing, but are you saying that on SOPA and SB 620, that there's no parcel size, that it could be up 1 acre or
none
less?
indicated, yeah, I haven't seen any
That's
for that.
crazy.
So, but if we think about the number of, let's say, potential campsites or campgrounds, I should say. So if there are 1,300 parcels that could qualify for this because they're 5 acres or greater and they're in rural areas, then that would be 11,700 campsites. So if you times that by 4 campers, that's 46,800 campers per day. Now, a lot of them won't qualify, so cut that in half to 650 parcels, let's say. So you get 650 parcels, they have this campground, that's still 23,400 campers per day. And there's traffic related to that, right? And this can be RVs, this could be folks pulling a trailer, yurt, setting up a yurt. So it's not just, tent campers. So just a really, really quick little thing there. This kind of looks funny on here, but Mac to PC. So this is kind of just the little timeline that we've this is the process we've followed so far. The Board of Supervisors in November of last year saw a conceptual description of this, and I believe it was Justin pulled it off consent. It had been on consent. So we asked for more information, pulled it off consent. They had a discussion. They asked Parks and Planning to draft an ordinance, have it come before planning. So it came before planning on the 20th, but it wasn't a real hearing. They kind of throw this around as if it was heard. It really wasn't. So it was, staff had requested it be continued because it was on the agenda. Some folks spoke on it, and one of the commissioners kind of started to open it, but they closed it right away because staff had requested it be continued. Right? So that wasn't a full hearing on the 20th. So on March 13th, we had this conversation at the Planning Commission. Some major concerns, were raised, particularly around fire safety. That's a huge one. And since there's no CEQA analysis, we wouldn't be able to have this looked at cumulatively. I was concerned about an initial study being done so that we could look at the full, project with a capital P and think about fire safety in that analysis. Anyway, so Planning Commission met on the 13th. It was unanimous. One person had stepped out. So, but all 4 of us voted to deny this and provided suggestions. Turns out we can't deny things. So it came back to planning. Came back to planning, and we voted to recommend denial to the board, and we suggested changes. So the next hearing will be Board of Supervisors on June 25th. June 25th, the last one there.
Is that open to the public?
Yes, absolutely, and please jot that down.
And the public will have an opportunity to comment.
That's right.
We will share the details and let you all know
Put yourself on that email list if you're not, and you'll receive, information from the RBDA.
Doesn't matter what the public says. Depending on what the might say. I mean, does anybody really care? that the board of supervisors know what we say?
Absolutely. It's changed the tenor and the direction of the planning commission, I can tell you that much. And
I can speak to that. One of the things that provides us with support is when people show up to the meetings and when people call in and when people write letters. I would say the most impactful is when people are there present, because when you get up and say how it's gonna impact your property or it's gonna impact your community, and you're sitting in that audience and you're looking us in the eye, it really makes us think about what we've just heard from people and, you know, our response to their concerns. If nobody shows up and it's just me sitting there saying, the people in my community really care about this, and it's like, really, there's nobody here. Nobody called in, nobody wrote a letter. And so that's when they say, well, it seems like it's just you because you don't have anybody behind you actually backing up what you're saying.
And before I go, I just want to say, I hope there's some money put in their budget for police and sheriff to come out, because there's gonna be a lot of.
No, actually,
enforcement is a concern.
the state bill will require the county to enforce quiet hours. And the state bill specifically says no funding will be provided.
So we have the one office.
We have
I'd
love to hear her.
Basically, the state is running the show.
The state regulates these kind of campgrounds currently, but they're trying to pass a law to exempt these to pull these kind of campgrounds out of the jurisdiction of the state on some level, and allow counties to regulate, to provide an overview and like a general parameter, the 9 campsites, you know, so they define like a 9 campsites, 36 guests, those kind of things, and then counties can provide more detail and regulate.
What will the population increase potentially be provided?
Okay, this will have to be the last question before Trina finishes.
Okay.
And otherwise, we're gonna either be here till 10
Got it.
or not be able to hear all the speakers.
I'm gonna wrap up pretty quickly, but I just wanted to point out, we do have some remaining concerns, obviously, around fire safety, in particular. You know, some of the suggestions that I've talked about with fellow commissioners and the public, and other folks are limiting further the allowable zone districts, right? Limiting that down much further. Limiting areas to limiting to areas outside the very high and high fire severity zones, right? That would really cut down the number of parcels that could do this. And also require a fire clearance from fire departments and the fire council perhaps. And anyone who's trying to rebuild knows a fire clearance is tough to get, and it should be in some ways, and particularly for this. It has to do with roadways and access and things like that the fire department would need. So those are some things, particularly around environmental review, and we touched on enforcement, and you're right, this would be an unfunded mandate, and it would require the sheriffs and fire department to enforce things like fire safety regulations and noise, et cetera, which we know we don't have the resources. But particularly on CEQA, definitely still have an issue about the inadequate analysis here of the project. The exemptions that staff invokes they invoke the common sense exemption. So the common sense exemption applies if it can be seen with certainty that there is no possibility that the activity may have a significant impact on the environment. A lead agency's determination that the common sense exemption applies must be supported with factual evidence. So, however, what staff has provided us is that the project is exempt from CEQA because the ordinance builds in protective environmental regulations, the environmental clearance process that I mentioned, and that there are no actual LICA proposals to analyze. and that we're talking about future camping areas. So they're saying because they don't have a permit before them, then it's somehow exempt, right? However, we know from CEQA guidelines that a project with a capital P means the whole of an action. That the whole of an action which has the potential for resulting in either direct physical change in the environment or reasonably foreseeable indirect physical change in the environment. So basically, by deferring the environmental review through this environmental clearance process that I mentioned, a per permit evaluation, so the per permit, segmenting it up, the county's piecemealing or segmenting the project by dividing it up and evaluating each of those separately, rather than looking at the whole of the project and the cumulative impacts there. And some of those issues, again, are around fire safety. So the environmental clearance process only looks at biotic resources and biotic concerns. It does not look at endangered species, threatened species, or wildfire, the potential for wildfire, whether it's cumulatively or individually for that matter. So those are some of our major concerns. Dave wrote an op-ed that recommends these, wait until this is allowed by state law, evaluate it thoughtfully, conduct a proper CEQA analysis, exclude high fire areas, prohibit generators, consider separating farm stays. We couldn't agree more. We couldn't agree more. And this is absolutely what I've spoken about at the Planning Commission. This is what Justin has spoken about and will speak about at the board. And then, of course, next steps. This is a call to action. So if you have concerns about this, reach out to your contacts. Write letters to the Board of Supervisors. Lobby the supervisors. We need 3 votes, right, to change this. Encourage letters from fire-wise communities and fire officials. Send letters to Senator Laird, to Assemblymember Pellerin, and Senator McGuire, author of SB 620, that you oppose it or have real concerns. And advocate farm stays. I think farm stays could be a good alternative to this. This is land that's already developed. It's already been through environmental analysis. It already has setbacks of 200 feet built in. There are roadways where fire can get there. So working agricultural lands, that could be, now the ordinance would have to be reworked for that. But it could be, an alternative. It could be a good way for what we've also been told is that some low-income farmers are trying to, are struggling to stay on their property, and this is a way to have income. So perhaps that's a compromise or a way to move forward with this. And with that, that's all I got. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Trina, but don't go away because we're going to make the exception since you have to leave. We'll let's see. We'll take 5 to 10 minutes of questions, and we'll skip the cards for this one, and then we'll do the cards for the following speakers.
And I will say that I'm not going to have the answers to all of your questions. Right? This is a moving, very dynamic process. Some things Sandy may know, Justin may know, and other things I'll write down and get back to you about. But okay.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Can I just ask, are there any supervisors on the board that are in favor of this?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So
Repeat the question.
So the question was, are there any supervisors on the board who are in favor of this? And this was brought forward by Supervisor Friend.
He's very much in favor of it. Supervisor McPherson, we aren't sure. District 5 is also highly impacted by fire, and so we're not sure. But one would think that he would naturally have some real concerns about this. Certainly his planning commissioner has been with me on concerns, both fire and environmental concerns. But that he would be one to reach out to and to lobby for sure. I'm not sure where others stand. Do you have a sense?
I'm going to say it a little more strongly, just because I got permission to. The planning commission voted 3-2 to not recommend this. The planning commissioner for the 2nd district is also staffed the second district, as we have someone in Justin's office. That person has Brown acted Bruce McPherson by talking with his staff. And they are working it. And, you know, we really need people in the community to come out and give Justin, like he said, the juice to fight back on this, because it's not going to be not that it was easy at the planning commission. I know that was really hard to get through, but that's the reality. To be really clear.
Yes, sir.
So I'm gonna go with that. I'm having a real hard time understanding why, if I'm living in the coastal zone, it takes me longer to get a permit than to build a building. And I have to go to the coastal commission and soil tests, all this stuff, and you're increasing the density in an area where we've been thrown out of insurance coverage because of high fire danger. And you're gonna potentially double or triple the population on a temporary basis. It's nuts.
So I can speak to that well, since I'm the Central Coast representative of the California Coastal Commission, which is that within the, I'll move over here so people mind. So within the coastal zone, there still has to be an update to our local coastal program in order for people to get coastal development permits. So, but I think the concern is that if this goes through, there's nothing stopping it from then going through that process. It will be controversial then, but I think one of the concerns that I have that I'm going to raise, because I know how much this is how problematic this is for people in this district, is the fact that people are losing their fire insurance.
Yeah.
Why would we then pass something that says we're going to allow for people to be in these areas unmanaged and camp, and that ultimately many more people will start losing their insurance because now there's a higher threat and higher risk of fire within these already high fire prone areas. So that's something that I'm going to bring up as well, because it doesn't make any sense.
Everybody who sleeps in my house or goes to the bathroom has a sprinkler in the room. Are there gonna be sprinklers at every bedside here? Are we gonna have 10 or 15 or 20,000 gallons of water stored at this place?
Kathy has a question.
Oh, don't worry. Don't worry.
Thank you very much. That was a great overview, answered a lot of my questions. Thank you, Justin, for coming up as well. If the state bill dies in committee, does that remove the threat of this ordinance? Or so how much energy should we invest there and trying to stop it there? And it was really, yeah, so that's my.
Well, it, you know, certainly could come back in a different form, and, but also this ordinance is written in such a way that if the bill does not pass, that the county can still regulate like this of one campsite. So it'd be campgrounds with one campsite allowing 4 people. Why they would want to do that, I don't know. I don't know who would want to do that, but maybe.
Follow-up questions. What is your assessment of the rationale for pushing this? So that we can address those, you know, just sort of objectively.
I
What's the
don't
impetus?
know. I heard, I mean, this is, when I was speaking to representatives of HIP Camp, they mentioned that Supervisor Friend had seen a presentation at CSAC, and that they had, you know, he had liked it, and HIP Camp had either reached out to him or he had reached out to HIP Camp. They couldn't remember which. And so that started the ball rolling on this. They were already working with McGuire on the bill. So there was this synergy with District 2 and HIP Camp, and
I'm curious whether there's any liability.
right. Well, you know, I thought of that. So they obviously are a private company. They're looking to expand their footprint worldwide. Actually, they're international. This certainly would remove some liability because counties would be on hook for enforcement and things like that. So it certainly is in their business interest for sure. Yeah. Yes, sir.
And then proposing managers who are accessible 24 hours, 7 days a week by phone.
Correct.
In an area where there's no cell phone.
And they're not requiring landlines. to be there.
I
Right.
think they're looking in the parallel universe. that I'm not familiar with.
Show us the next meeting. Could I just
I
ask
absolutely
one
agree.
more follow-up question? I'm trying to get a handle on this idea that there is already this organization called HipCamp,
Right.
who is flying under the radar, no enforcement in place. People are renting out these spaces on their property. We have one officer from the sheriff's department for the entire North Coast area. How do you figure that there's going to be any regulation or any enforcement of any value if this thing is allowed to pursue? Because it seems like right now, county can't even manage the illegal campsites that are
Right.
already out there.
That's right. They're
Right.
being
So how
advertised.
could any supervisor be for this?
According to
just
that
wrong.
friend, once the ordinance goes through and you people who live in the mountains get used to it, this is what he said to me.
Zach?
Zach said this, yes, and they will all sign up for this and start paying TOT, which they are not paying now and not being supervised now. My question to him was, and why would they do that when they've been flying under the radar, the county's aware of it and not enforcing it? Because they will.
So this is your call to action, because at one of the two previous hearings, the opponents of this proposed ordinance were way outnumbered by people who were in favor of it. So it seems like it might seem ludicrous to you or us, but this thing really might happen. And there are people, you can go online and read the letters from the people in favor of this about how they could pay their mortgage on their farm by having people stay there. And so there's a big lobby in favor of this. And you can't count on rationality to carry what's going to happen.
A number of us that I know of wrote letters, sent things to the Board of Supervisors, to the Planning Commission. Our letters were not included in that packet, not a one of them. It was all, I love Hip Camp, it's so much fun. Marcia makes lovely muffins. Could we please do this? Yeah, what happened to our letters?
Well, if they went the last day.
It
They
wasn't,
didn't.
we did it right after the March 13th meeting. They just weren't there.
Our letters were posted on the planning commission. If you go to the previous letter, it's posted, it's up there. All the new letters, because I was there reviewing, in the chambers, were only the newest things that have been submitted. And most of the people are for having a camp and camping. And there are many commissioners and supervisors that are for, and if it's a majority rules, we will lose. Because
There's one commissioner that's looking to loosen it, to reduce it to 3-acre persons and reduce, make the requirements far looser. So definitely, and that's Manu's commissioner. So definitely there's a need for action and advocacy here in the community. So certainly, yeah, yes.
Yeah, over the years, I've been on a couple of things really stand out on this issue. I don't for clarification.
Eric, can you come, the people on Zoom won't hear you.
I was hoping. But I ended up studying a whole bunch of county use of firefighters and Cal Fire particularly. And when you look at the entire state, the counties that have been brought up a bunch of times, pretty disciplined. We aren't disciplined. This county fell far, far below a competent response to the fire we had 3 or 4 years. There's no doubt about it. It's clearly clear as and the information is all there. I don't hear that happening, that there was a failure. And why isn't the state, which has this huge multi-million-dollar operation, enforcing the fire codes? have this thing coming in at the same time. It just seems like one problem hasn't been solved. We're adding another one to it.
Okay, I think we have to move on.
Can I
Thanks-
ask another
thanks,
question? I
Trina.
have a really short question. Yes. If your neighborhood has a homeowners association, can you make rules that are stricter than that and not allow that?
That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, but that's a really great question.
I'd love to know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Can I say two? No.
Okay, I think, thanks, Trina. If we,
Can I just sum up? Okay. Essentially what you're saying,
okay, Fred, once-
essentially what you're saying is the June 25th meeting is
Yes.
very important.
June
Okay.
25th, and sending emails and lobbying before then is
Okay.
important. And, okay, so we have another four speakers, I think. If we have a half hour each, we'll be here till 10:30. So the speakers, each of the speakers was told in advance, they had 5 to 10 minutes. So we'll hold to that. If you have questions or comments, write them on the cards and we'll work through them at the end of all the speakers. There are two things that I wanted to add here. The RBDA presentation that we're gonna talk a little bit. Our RBDA board voted to spend our funds to hire an environmental attorney to send a letter to the county disputing their CEQA exemption. And we have a couple of generous donors who have volunteered to start seed fund for a lawsuit if necessary. So we hope it doesn't come to that, but I can get the sense of the audience that you're not in favor of this. And for our last resort, if it comes to that, RBDA is prepared to take action. Okay, Susan Mason is going to talk about fire. Susan has a 20-year history in the firefighting business. And I forget all the different details, but she's going to tell about her.
Okay, I'm also on the board of directors of the Fire Safe Council, and I run our neighborhood, Pine Ridge neighborhood, Firewise neighborhood. 20 years of going to fire and medical calls, it becomes very apparent the boo-boos that people can get themselves into. I've seen 20 years of various boo-boos. So that's kind of going to give a little bit of background to my remarks. I was a little bit taken aback when the process that Trina showed said, well, the first step is we do a GIS review. GIS doesn't tell you what the conditions are like on the ground. Is this in redwoods with the duff clearly swept away? Or is this in the middle of chaparral on a southwest aspect on a slope, and you can just smell the dry vegetation? A site visit would be mandatory to find out whether this is even safe. These are people coming from the city. Do they know not to park their car on top of dry grass? Yes, I can tell you about the incidents. I think it went to 8 acres. Propane. Propane appliances are not totally safe. There are mishaps. I won't go into that, that's PTSD, but the propane can cause trouble. Vehicles can cause trouble. Generators. Generators, a little bit of a can of worms that way, people swapping gasoline around. I'm just wondering about water. even the Davy Tree guys have to have an Indian back pump and a tool for catching wildfires if they, have a spark or whatever. Why wouldn't there have to be a charged garden hose handy? Now, the rules say no bonfires. Who's going to enforce that? Public safety. Somebody has a medical emergency and there's no cell service and no Wi-Fi. And who knows, how are they supposed to find their site manager? People from out of the area, they don't even know where to go to find help. Not savvy to the risks at all. So I think, vegetation models, if a property can't get insurance or properties having the insurance not renewed, is that a viable, safe property to have campers on? No. Okay. Has anybody looked up Harvest Host? Harvest Host is the farm camping. A friend of mine and I looked up sites thinking, oh, this would be kind of fun. Notable that Santa Cruz County had none. It's kind of like the glamorous Walmart, take your RV there and park. I'm almost taken back by the speed of this process when the bill is still not out of committee. And when they want to rush this through, yet I'm watching neighbors having problem after problem after problem with the rebuilding process. It just seems to me very mean-spirited, and it seems just wrong. So with the 20-minute response to a lot of the properties up here by fire service for medical or fire, you could get a pretty big mess going before you get there. I just think that it's pretty naive to say that there's unlikely to be any consequences. Any environmental impact report done would clearly show that it's not a negative declaration. I'm just kind of astounded at that and the speed at which they want to go for this. How come the county isn't looking into trying to encourage some actual campgrounds, managed campgrounds with proper sanitation, proper rules, proper oversight? If you looked at any of the sites that have camps on them now, what do they do for sanitation? Has anybody looked? Portaloos are pretty expensive. I don't know what you'd have to charge to, anyway.
Hey, my name is Doug Banks. I've been at Hit Campus since 2021. What I do for sanitation, it's called the Banks Latrine. It's a 5-gallon bucket, a snap-on toilet seat, and a bag that goes over it.
Yeah, well, I can't see city people dealing with that.
Let me finish, please. Our cameras
Actually, I thought
have
we
to
were
keep
getting
all their
questions.
trash.
I thought we weren't having questions during the speaker.
For comments either.
And I've never had a problem with a camper leaving trash, not using.
Okay, you're willing to use
That's how we do it.
Leave your comments on the cards.
Yeah, this was about taking your own portable room. Yeah, some people are savvy with that, but a lot of people aren't, and they would like to have something on site. Now, self-contained trailers, that takes care of that problem, but I'm just looking at the tent camping going, wow, I don't think I'd want to be renting a portaloo at what they cost. You'd have to rent an awful lot of spaces. What about bad weather? What are you going to do with people if we get high winds? Hip Camp's got $1 million policy. That kind of concerns me. Any idea what it costs for a fire response, particularly if aircraft is launched? $1 million is nowhere near enough to cover something like that. I just am worried about the ability to not call and just feeling like there wouldn't be enough staffing to make sure these places are really doing their housekeeping to keep the fire danger down. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
No, the comments or questions go at the end.
They come at the end? Okay, great.
Write them on the card or put them in chat.
Okay, I just think, I think that the objection that the Fire Safe Council came up with is we're just really worried about the fire safety. There's a lot of PTSD up here. You call the fire department to come out if somebody has a campfire and they go, oh, well, it's a warming fire. And, you know, who takes care of that issue? So anyway, that's just our remarks on, I think I've covered all the worries here. But certain vegetation models are just
You
not.
just started all the worries.
Thank you. So, I'm going to follow up with a few slides about fire. This is a slide from Scientific American, published in 2023, and they reported that recreation was the largest cause of wildfire in California. In fact, from 2000 to 2022, human recreational activities in California sparked nearly 5,000 wildfires, resulting in almost 900,000 acres burned. Let's see. Well, here I've got to do this as a presentation mode. So this is the Itawanda fire, Isle Royal National Park. All of these illegal campfires started all these fires. Big Sur. And there are two ways that campers don't follow fire safe procedures. One is they deliberately have illegal fires. They don't pay attention to the rules. In San Bernardino National Forest, rangers on patrol doused several dozen fires one night and morning. And they found a total of 700 illegal fires in 8 months in 2020. So making fires illegal doesn't stop people from having them. The second way is if the campers, it's what Susan was getting to, they don't know what they're doing. These guys had a permit for their propane barbecue or propane fire pit, and they set it down on some inches of dry needles. These colors don't come through, but this pale yellowish color over Bonnie Doon is from the 2024 April map showing moderate fire. Most of the green throughout the area, the entire map is high fire hazard, and the white up near Skyline is very, very high. So everybody here thought it made sense to exclude the high and very high fire zones from LICA permitting. On the county staff report for the May 8th Planning Commission meeting, the county document listed site requirements for LICAs. And one of the requirements that was at that time under consideration was that the campsites must be located outside of sensitive habitat as well as flood and fire hazard areas. That's page 5. On page 13, the county staff responded by saying, no change to the ordinance. A significant portion of the county is located in the very high and high fire hazard severity zones, approximately 50% of the total county. Removing these areas would render most of the county ineligible to pursue a LICA permit. And so the summary is that recreation is the largest cause of fires in California. Outlawing fires doesn't start them. LICAs should be excluded from wildfire areas. And it's shameful that our county would even consider allowing commercial campgrounds on properties that are so flammable that insurance companies won't insure them. Okay, now let's go on to Nancy. Nancy Philly's going to tell us about her neighbors.
Okay, just, whoops, I've already screwed it up. I was trying to touch the thing so that I could make a little point here. Okay. Why is it not moving?
Yeah, it is on the screen.
It is on the screen. Okay. Just for point of reference, this little bit of light right here is actually 2 stories high. In early 2021, we discovered there was a new owner at 5187 Empire Grade, an 80-acre parcel immediately below Pine Ridge, where I live and many of us do. The first thing that happened was that they accidentally or on purpose set a trailer on fire, and CDF had to come put the fire out. The new owners had their first big event there a few months later. They said it was a fundraiser for Ukraine. So thinking it was a one-time event, neighbors tried to ignore the music that began on Friday night and went all night, all weekend long. I don't remember if anyone called the sheriff that weekend to complain about the music. It could be felt in our breastbones a good mile away. That one-time event was the beginning of raves though, not a one-off. 3-day parties started happening most weekends. A PA system was added so that singing and instructions could be more readily heard by partygoers and Pine Ridge. A 30-foot plus pad was cut out of the hillside, so a structure big and bright enough it caused drivers on Empire Grade to ask what it was. It could be built. The burned dirt and debris from the illegal cut were dumped over the hillside toward Majors Creek, which is a watershed area supplying water to Santa Cruz. The structure was lit up every night, until Karma and one of the windstorms in the 2023 season that we had destroyed it. There were complaints made about cars parked on Empire Grade, so car parking areas were also graded. A pool was dug. A couple of porta potties turned up. By May, the number of people in attendance grew to well over 100 people per weekend. Buildings started with a dome-shaped dormitory. Fire-surviving stable blocks were being converted into sleeping pods, and various other structures, like a kitchen, were being built. Several RVs arrived and tents were erected. Strobe lights were strung in the trees high enough up that the growth above the growth recommended clearing heights of branches. Lights were on all night during events. They had bonfires that were visible from Empire Grade and were still going at 1:30 at night in a fire season. Numerous neighbors called CDF and the sheriff. CDF stopped coming out for the reason Susan said. They were declared ceremonial or warming fires, and there was nothing they could do to put them out. The sheriff sent the one officer assigned to all of San Lorenzo Valley, Bonnie Doon, and Davenport every night when he could. Citations were issued, but we were told they were useless unless the county took action. So we signed petitions and appealed to the county to make it stop. They sent out someone once with a 2-sheriff officer escort to investigate. Nothing was done, and the raves got more dramatic. Finally, we discovered their website. They advertised Burning Man-inspired events with sleeping quarters available for fees up to $450 per weekend. No one was collecting TOT at these events, even though they were clearly commercial. It took almost a year and a half for the county to take action. When they did, 30+ violations were cited. We still don't know if that's what stopped them, and having raves, or if it was the 2023 storms that did, because they were still advertising upcoming events planned for last year and then canceling them due to weather. Why am I going into such detail about unpermitted rave site? Because under the proposed LICA ordinance, they could legally start up again. Yes, there would be limitations on noise after 10 p.m. Not that that rule stopped them very often in the past. They would have to reduce the number of overnighters to 36 rather than 100. Although one wonders if the campers could invite friends to visit to enjoy the wonderful ambiance. There is no light ordinance in Santa Cruz County, so the strobe lights and redwood trees, you can see the high one. They bought in a crane and hoisted a strobe light. Those are redwood trees that you can kind of see. This was taller than redwood trees. There were lights everywhere. Nothing could be done to stop that. Oftentimes when the sheriff came out, they weren't allowed to come in. They were told they didn't have a search warrant and therefore they weren't allowed onto the property to tell them to stop doing what they were doing. They had one of the lower level strobe light events just a couple of weeks ago. There's still multiple RVs on the property waiting to be occupied. The base of the Burning Man Pavilion is still there, as is the dome base and the stable block pods. Under the proposed LICA ordinance, they would all be welcome. The LICA ordinance would encourage inexpensive fees for campers, but there's no requirement for them. Hey, why not charge more for additional amenities? A few $100s a weekend is for each of 36 campers is pretty good money. Signs will be posted saying no fires or smoking. I looked up hip camps in Santa Cruz County. More than half of them advertise campfires as some of their amenities. So I doubt that a ban is going to stop people from having fires all year round, even in dangerous dry seasons when residents can't do carefully monitored backyard burns. Did I mention that under this ordinance, there would be no on-site requirements for water to put out non-existent fires that accidentally got out of hand? The fire marshal turned up at the March 13th Planning Commission and recommended that there be 10,000 gallons of water, which is required for anybody rebuilding. The staff said that was too restrictive and that was not included in the ordinance. If I can find hip camps, so can the county. I asked if they were aware of these unpermitted sites and was told the county only responds if there are complaints. Believe me, we tried. Nothing was done to help us. The proposed LICA ordinance says repeat violations will result in sites being shut down. How many warnings will they get? The county is excited about collecting TOT, the transient occupancy tax. But if you talk to the tax collector, it's unclear whether or not TOT can be collected on non-permanent structures, such as tents and RVs. So maybe not. It's suggested we call the sheriff or fire if there are problems. I think the magical TOT collected should be used in part to hire a LICA manager we could call who would be available 24/7 to handle issues, not an overworked deputy sheriff or fire respondent who may or may not come. So that's my little speech, but I just wanted to let you know, some of you know I live in Pine Ridge at the end of Azalea Lane. Pine Ridge used to have 90 houses before the fire. We're down quite a few. I believe my property falls under this ordinance because it's 38 acres. Under the ordinance as recommended or as written or proposed, assuming I took a month off every year, I could have over 3,000 RVs come to my property every year. Or I could have 36 campers in a variety of ways, 10 in a clump, whatever, as long as they didn't exceed 36. That would mean that over 12,000 guests could come just to my property in the course of a year. If 1% of those people make mistakes, aren't cooperative, start fires, do whatever, that's over 120 necessary calls for help. And the county can't handle that and won't handle that. This has got to be fought like crazy. So
Okay, thanks, Nancy. Steve Holman's next. And
Just leave that picture up because I like it. I could see it from my house.
maybe I don't have your bio.
I'll do it.
Okay.
So I'm gonna do my bio. So my wife, Chris, and I have lived in Pine Ridge for 44 years. Then there was a fire, so we lived elsewhere for 22 months. Well, we got another 10 months back in Bonneville, and now we're back at our house for the last 2 years. So yay, and thanks for everybody who helped. Nancy is our rear neighbor. We don't have 38 acres, but we're looking forward to seeing how many people she could pack in there and how many fires she could get
200
going.
feet away from your house.
Yeah, yeah. So now with after the fire, we can see her house and she could see our house. I'm just joking. So first of all, I want to thank everybody in Pine Ridge and the Bonniewood, McCammon neighborhood that signed the petition that went to the county that said, hey, we can't have this in our backyard. This isn't legal. And they slowly got their enforcement mechanisms going, and they brought the people to a public hearing where they had to sign an agreement and under threat of a almost $10,000 fine if they ever do this again. And then also they were told they would be in Superior Court if they did it again. So the county was slow to get going, but it did get going and it did happen. The zoning investigator was Marcus Mendez, and I think he did an okay job. So I'm glad this isn't there anymore. It's much nicer now, but it could change any
They're still
weekend.
there. They're
It could
ready to
change
go
any
back
weekend.
up.
The previous owner lived there with a couple of horses and a dog and by himself and had a 2-bedroom house, and he didn't do this kind of
He
stuff.
had trailers, but everybody was really local. Yeah.
So I want to say the LICA is not a low impact anything. It's just low regulation camping. And I'll start out by asking, did the planners at 71 Ocean Street forget that we lost 900 houses on 657 properties in the North Coast, Bonnie Doon, and San Lorenzo Valley only 3 years ago? We do not need additional fire danger in our forests. We all know this. Who will be able to get fire insurance when a hip camp can pop up almost anywhere, increasing the fire danger? No one will be insurable. The state and county have plenty of laws pertaining to campgrounds, and I used to work for 3 different counties, so I know about them. And I also worked for 15 years as a consultant in environmental health matters. I have some printouts here of state and county ordinances. There's about 25 pages here, how you regulate and operate and organize camp. This is what you're supposed to do if you want to do it. Not just, with no water and a pit latrine in your backyard. And I will leave these mostly for the board of RBDA. The county already requires use permits for the operation of campgrounds and conference centers. Campgrounds must be located on 20 acres. You can't have it on anything less than 20 acres unless it already existed before the ordinance was adopted years ago. Why would we want to change this logical provision? What's the benefit to us? Nothing. There are state of California laws under the Health and Safety Code, Title 17 of the California Code of Regulation, Title 19 of the California Fire Code, numerous codes under the State Building Standards Code that all regulate camping and organized camps. Why do we think we can just exempt ourselves from the state laws and have a little county ordinance that's going to make this groovy? I don't think the county council is doing his job, because he should be advising the board. It's crazy. It's crazy talk. And also, I think if we can either stall this thing from getting out of the legislature so that it never gets out of committee before January, and if we can either sue the county or convince the county to stall things, Jack Friend will be out of office and we can put this thing to rest. My next comment is the County Environmental Health Service has local and state laws regarding solid waste management, sewage disposal, food preparation safety, water supply, site supervision, swimming areas, and emergency medical planning. You have to have an emergency medical plan for people that camp at your campground. Why would we not want to do these things for these casual campers? They're basically an unregulated campgrounds. Why would local residents favor the idea of amending or repealing all of these 25 pages of state laws and county ordinances
just to turn something that's basically an Airbnb type industry into something that might become unsupervised partying and hell raising in the woods with loud music, fires, bright lights, generators, and all within an easy to get ministerial permit. It still is crazy talking. Nancy has the picture to prove it. The impetus for this type of law has come from one state legislator trying to make it easier for large agricultural landowners to circumvent farm labor housing laws by allowing agricultural workers to camp out when harvesting fruits and vegetables. Why would we want to undo a half century of progress in making farm labor housing become safe and habitable? Why would we want to increase the fire danger to our almost uninsurable homes? We wouldn't, we don't. There's a reason that the local fire chiefs and fire marshals do not favor this proposal. They remember the difficulties they experienced in the 2008 Martin fire, the 2009 Lockheed DeSwanton fire, and the 2020 CPU fire. Having 100 little campsites in Bonnie Doon, many with illegal fires or other ignition sources like, surprise, propane to flame, would be a lot like having hundreds of lightning strikes. We don't really need to go through that again. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you is I think we can defeat this, but we should be prepared to take this to court. We should be prepared to put some money into this. It's like when the RBDA sued UCSC a decade ago. We might need to do this again. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Keep your questions coming in the cards because I'm going to give the last presentation, and then, although I see Steve went partway through my presentation by flipping his papers. Okay, one follow-up about the neighborhood impacts before I go to the RBDA overview, and that's about the generators. If a 9-acre property has 9 campgrounds and each one has a generator that has to be only 50 feet from the neighboring property, and they can run those generators from 10 in the morning till 8. 6 a.m. No, I think at 10, the county has an ordinance, and then for the LICAs, they have to extend the quiet hour. They have to start the quiet hours 2 hours early and end 2 hours late. So I think it goes from 10 in the morning to 6 in the evening. But anyhow, if you border a 9-acre parcel on one side, you could have 9 generators running all day, 50 feet from your property. And if you have multiples of these in different directions, you could have a lot of noise. Okay. The people we invited to give talks on wildlife all couldn't make it tonight. So even I'm a geologist, but I'm going to talk a little bit about wildlife. The Santa Cruz County General Plan protects biological diversity and wildlife corridors. Remember that term, wildlife corridors. We're going to come back to that. The county plan objective such and such is, quote, to maintain the biological diversity through an integrated program that includes wildlife corridors. You might not think that recreation has a negative impact on wildlife. Jacob Pollock, Dr. Pollock at UCSC, wrote that in general, it can be difficult to accept that recreation activities, especially quiet, non-motorized activities, can have harmful effects on wildlife. But he went on to say, in recent years, researchers have found evidence that a variety of these activities can have detrimental effects, and he has his references cited there. And for example, Chris Wilmer's Puma project found that when pumas hear human voices and know that people are around, they will curtail some of their activities within 2,000 feet. They'll abandon their kills they'll kill twice as many deer just so they don't have to go back where people are. They won't build their dens within 600 meters, 2,000 feet of where they can hear voices. This I got from Jonathan Whitmer's letter to the Planning Commission in May. He noted that on April 16th, the California Fish and Game Commission noted that the Central Coast mountain lion is a candidate species under the California Endangered Species Act. An earlier version of the Leica ordinance had language that was updated, that was removed in the updated version. The language that was removed said, quote, the proposed disturbance area of a Leica shall not be located within habitat for protected species identified as candidate. Well, the state identified that species of mountain lion as a candidate. Okay, now considering the wildlife corridors. The next two slides that I'm going to show are maps. This first one was prepared by the Nature Conservancy, and the second one was prepared by Semper Virens. The shaded area here is what they called priority conservation areas. And in the Semper Viren map, they call it priority conservation zones. Those are the dotted area just to the southeast of Bonnie Doon. This is their vision for the Great Park. And in the red box, the fine print says we consider these areas to be conservation priorities due to factors such as wildlife corridors. So this is the kind of area that our county ordinance, our county county plan, whatever that county goal is to maintain these wildlife corridors. And so we're talking about putting in the county these 1,300 camp areas covering 20,000 properties of 20,000 acres and sprinkling them through there in these places where the wildlife, where the pumas are going to want to stay 2,000 feet away. And that's going to disrupt these wildlife corridors that it's our county's mission to preserve. Okay, this is so that was me standing in for the biologists. And now, let's look at this comparison of the review that the county took when we were coming up with rules for commercial cannabis. The county reviewed the impacts for 5 years. They established the C4 committee. Eric Hoffman was on that committee. It was a committee of residents, people from supervising youth in school, cannabis growers, and they met for years. I heard about it from Eric. And the county held numerous well-advertised public meetings. I went to a bunch of them. I saw Eric at a bunch of them. They solicited recommendations from the Santa Cruz Fish and Wildlife Advisory Board. I went through the current advisory board's agenda for the last months, and there was nothing in there about lichens. For cannabis, you have to have on-site water storage. You have to have an on-site dwelling. Generators are prohibited except for emergency backup power. The regulations were all developed after state laws were enacted that made these the commercial cultivation legal, and it was excluded from the coastal zone plus a 1 mile buffer, except in these special situations with existing structures. As a result of all that, I checked with the county licensing board. We currently have 47 licensed cannabis cultivations in the county. Let's compare that with what the county's doing to evaluate the Leica ordinance. Reviewed for 5 years, more like 5 months. Any committee? No. Held numerous well-advertised meetings? No. We didn't even, RBDA didn't even know about this until we heard from Sandy. Recommendations from Fish and Wildlife Advisory Board, no. Required on-site water storage, no. On-site dwelling, there might be, I think, I'm not sure the current LICA proposal. There might or might not be a requirement for an on-site dwelling. For generators prohibited all except for emergency, no, generators will be allowed during the daytime. Regulations developed after state laws enacted, no, trying to squeeze this through before it's too late. Coastal zone plus 1 mile buffer, no. And so this is for a possible 1,300 properties on 20,000 acres compared to 47. Look how much more attention the county put to these 47 cannabis cultivations compared to these campgrounds, which, as I showed in the fire presentation, recreation is the main cause of fires in California. So, okay, a couple words about CEQA before I wind this up. Trina got into this. Instead of evaluating the cumulative impacts of having this LICA program, the county intends to evaluate the individual disturbance of each individual property. But that doesn't take into account this fragmentation, interrupting the wildlife corridors that I talked about. So any one individual one might not have that big of an impact. But when you look at hundreds of campgrounds distributed through these rural forested areas that the Nature Conservancy and Sempervirens mapped as priorities for conservation, how do you get to the conclusion that there's no possibility of a foreseeable impact? It's crazy. Okay, so I mentioned before, the RBDA board voted to consult with an attorney. He's on vacation. He gets back this weekend, and we'll be in touch. And I hope we don't have to go to a lawsuit. But if it comes to that, we'll be back with our new website, and Highlander asking for donations to help out the seed funders. Okay, I think this is the final slide. RBDA recommendations. Wait until LICAs are allowed by SB 620 before developing a county ordinance. Conduct a real CEQA review. Exclude LICAs from all of CAL FIRE's hazardous zones, not just very high. Exclude LICAs from areas mapped as priority conservation lands and wildlife corridors. Exclude LICAs from coastal zone plus 1 mile buffer as for cannabis. Prohibit generator use except for emergencies. SB 620 requires the county to enforce quiet hours. It's right there in the state, in the proposed state law. But they also say in a footnote, no funds will be provided for enforcement. So the county should specify how it's going to fund this mandated enforcement when they can't enforce the existing noise rules. Consider separate rules for farm stays on agricultural lands. In some ways, this is what happened with cannabis. It makes sense to grow cannabis in greenhouses on agriculture and CA zoned properties. The ordinance is purported to increase camping opportunities for low-income residents, but I believe this is just a ploy. There's no cap on prices. There are no reduced rates for low-income campers. And in fact, the campsite requirements favor motorhomes or trailers with self-contained toilet facilities because they're exempt from sanitary requirements. If this is really going to be an ordinance to provide low-income campers to have a place to go, there should be some requirement for this, like caps or a certain number of campsites that are inexpensive. The proposals to include things like that in the revised ordinance were rejected by staff. Okay, what can you do? You heard before from Trina, the proposed LICA ordinance is on the agenda for the Board of Supervisors meeting on June 25th. They have the authority to vote and approve this ordinance at that meeting. Tell the supervisors what you think. You can go in person to the meeting at the county building for when the cannabis stuff was going on. Everybody was given 2 minutes. If you're there, you can speak right in person. You can get a time allotment to speak by Zoom. You can send email before the meeting to the Board of Supervisors and to the state legislators. And if it comes to a lawsuit and RBDA sends out one of our email appeals, consider making a donation. Okay, now maybe people have been submitting questions on the cards or.
I wonder if I can have just 30 more seconds.
Yeah, you can have 30
I
more.
forgot to say something. The county also has chapter 10.16 of their zoning ordinance. It's the opposite of like that. It's called the no camping zone ordinance. And it's the places where you can't camp. And basically it's Ocean Street Extension, Paradise Park, all the areas between the city and the university, pretty much. Carbonera Creek around the Carbonera State subdivision and additional Carbonera Creek areas all near the city county boundary. So the city has gotten the county to protect it nicely from this.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share.
No, yeah, thanks, Steve. That's I hadn't heard about that. That's interesting.
Thank you, Dave. I just wanted to add, I mean, people can do multiple ones of these, obviously, right? And I think it's really going to be important
Yeah.
that it's not seen as a minority in the community. So talking to our neighbors, mobilizing networks, whether it's road associations or other networks in Bonnie Doon, I think are really important. Because there's already people saying, oh, this is the same minority in Bonnie Doon that doesn't want anything. So I think if this is a widespread feeling, which I think it is, we have to get a lot of voices at this meeting before and during the meeting. Did you want to see?
I think Eric was going to be monitoring the chat.
Oh, good.
Yeah, nothing happening in the chat right now. Actually, a couple comments. One from chat. I think there will be a definite impact on medical emergencies. My cousin in the volunteer fire department here makes most of their calls to campgrounds in the area, not calls to residences. Just a comment. Here's another comment. Any idea if Zach Friend is looking for a job with Hip Camp after he finishes being a supervisor? Maybe he's looking after their interests rather than his interests, our interests.
Okay.
Can I just say, we've heard that name, not from reliable. Not.
Okay, Eric, if that's all the chat, do you want to go through the questions on cards?
That's really it.
Oh.
I think there was more discussion than we got earlier.
Okay.
And I have a note for Justin.
Okay, if there are no more card questions, we'll turn it into a free-for-all then. Fred.
Can I come up and stand?
Yeah.
You gave it card.
Oh, I gave a card to. Okay.
Eric, well, I'll tell you, it's been a really hectic 2 weeks for me because when I found out about this, I've been on telephones and everything else. But you know, it's really ironic that we're here tonight because of this camping program and the dangers it poses to us for fires because it's unsupervised. It's an unsupervised recreational venue. But you got to think back a little bit because we've had an operation going here in Bonnie Doon for over 20 years and nobody has spoken up about it. Does anybody know where it is? It's the ecological reserve. And as much as I love it, and I'm up there all the time, you're paying a cost for this. We had a fire, think back in 2008, and it was started by two individuals that I know of. and it almost burned down this magic mystical mountain. I walked by that place for almost 8 years, and eventually I couldn't handle my conscience from what I was looking at. And there was a tremendous fuel load that was growing as a result of that fire. So starting in 2018, I took it upon myself to communicate from the governor's office all the way down to District 3. Fish and Wildlife, CAL FIRE. What I found out was there's nobody up there. Nothing has changed prior to the fire. I was communicating with Fish and Wildlife, and let me tell you from my experience, they don't care about you or me or this community. And it's very frustrating. After a year, I finally, on my own, and thanks to District 3 supervisor, I organized a walkthrough March 29th. And then COVID broke out and just tore it to pieces. We couldn't do it. And it was my mission to at least get some sort of fire management plan or wilderness plan, and it all went down to pieces. So Fish and Wildlife amply demonstrated to this community back in 2008 that when you don't have a supervisor at that location, you can have all the signs you want. No fire, no this, no that. That thing almost burnt this place down. And think about this. I was on Pine Flat and Quail that evening at 9 o'clock. The night before, we had a sustained 25-mile-an-hour wind blowing through from the east. And lucky for us that that fire started the next day, and at 3:45 in the afternoon, the wind changed. If not, it would have taken it right through. And my hat's off to CAL FIRE. There was one airdrop that I photographed. It was one of the most awesome airdrops I've seen in my career as a fireman and being on these fires. But he dropped it on the head of the fire it was just about 3:40. And then he dropped it, the same load, he partitioned it out. So he dropped it on 2 spot fires ahead of it. And then the wind changed. Sorry to say, that aircraft crashed with its crew a year later. And that's the price we pay for this nonsense that's going on right now. It's very frustrating when I go through the fire code 7.92 and find out that a lot of it does not apply to what we're doing up here. You know, I'm up at the reserve right now. I still walk through there. I carry a portable ham radio up, on me. I carry a first aid kit because they don't provide any assistance. I feel that they have a duty to protect not only this community, but the hikers that go in there. There should be first aid kits. There should be a way for you to communicate out if you have a problem. None of those services are being provided. And yet you can take a short drive up Empire Grade and go to San Vicente Woods, and you'll find out what they do. And I did that this week. They have a ranger person on duty at all times. They have water, they have restrooms, they have first aid stations. So it's been going on for a long time. This issue is bringing it up, but we still have a problem up there. And I love it. It's a tremendous place. And before I end this, I think an applause should be given to Dawn Mackey and her late husband, who have done several things up here. They established a communication system that has helped me out on 2 emergencies already. I carry it around in the reserve. But Dawn is trying to keep those trails open on a weekly basis, and it's a tough go. And I feel that Fish and Wildlife has a duty to be working on those trails too. But anyway, that's enough. I have so much to say, and I guess this is probably the most important, just to let you know. But what's going on here it's really rather frightening. You know, I've been on these fires. I've been here on all 3 fires. And the last one was the worst. You know, we saved probably 40, 50 homes with these young kids I was with. We saved country estates, by the way. We kept the fire from going through the big timber. We did lose 2 homes there. I don't want to have to go through this again, not with 5 back fusions. And that's what you get when you work in the fire department. I don't want to be on these things again. So it's very frustrating. What I hear tonight is worse than what I suspected. You know, I went through 2 weeks. I've been on telephones. I've been, you know, calling an insurance commissioner's office, calling insurance companies to find out what's the impact of all these campers, how it's going to affect you and I when we're losing our homeowners insurance. I lost mine. It cost me $10,000 just for fire. So if you've got somebody who's going to set up a camping ground, they're going to get their policy canceled, and so are you, because you're right there. And let me tell you, when I talked to these insurance companies this week, and, you know, it took me half a day with the insurance commissioner to get, you know, some form of communication established. They know what's going on. They're not dumb. They do risk assessments all the time. They're following SB 620, and they're following every county that's considering enacting an ordinance like what's going on right now. And if you think your rates are going to go up or not go up, or if you think your insurance policy is not going to be canceled, well, the word I get is the likelihood it's will. And the point I want to make tonight is we caused the fires, and Dave brought it out really good. 90% plus of all fires are caused by you and I. And Smokey the Bear was right. Only you can prevent fires, and Paul knows it. You can have all the signs in the world, but when you bring people in, we do it. And like 5,000 fires are in the recreational areas. So, you know, you can outlaw fire pits and all this sort of stuff, but just the fact that our people are in there unsupervised. So I walk by the reserve, I'm in there and I see what's going on. So anyway, that's all I got to say.
Hi, Justin. Nice to meet you. My name is Phil Hubble. I went to the planning meeting. Sat through most all of it. Not a lot of you people were there, but that's okay. You know, Mr. Justin, how long have you been living in Santa Cruz County?
Since 2007.
2007. See, I've been here since I was like that big. Okay. I grew up White Elk Creek when it wasn't owned by the state park. It was both owned by the McLeans. I've seen Costanoa put up in San Mateo County. That's the way things are supposed to be done. Really like the way they did that. White Elk Creek, except for the fires burning it out, up until the fires, was a pristine, untouched wilderness. Magnificent. Scotts Creek's like that too. Santa Cruz County gets their water by tapping in off all the creeks going into town. I've been fighting against commercialization in this community since I was a little kid, because that's what it's all about. It's about money. Okay, we have some of the richest people in the county living up here now in my neighborhood. The old timers are gone and the money's coming in. And so, you know, I've had to constantly battle RBDA. I'm glad we're able to meet now because the pandemic, we couldn't talk. Okay, and stop me if I go too long. But I like to talk about what's real. Okay, what's really going on? What's really going on is this area is overpopulated. You can see it. Okay, Santa Cruz, when I was a kid, was a nice, quaint town. No druggies, no camping, none of the BS you see when you go to Costco. We haven't solved any problems and created problems. That's what we do. We look the other way. Okay, that's what we do. Because of money. Property is too valuable to help the homeless. The commercialization in Santa Cruz, the buildings going up, they're for lease. You can't buy them. Corporations own them. It's not just here, it's everywhere. The whole Bay Area. Okay, this is about money. People making money for their own individual profit over the rural integrity of our community. And you know what? I get fired up about it. You can see it. Okay, because I love sitting in my backyard and not having to listen to parties at the winery every weekend with live music because we made them play no amplified music. Because the owner of the property finally realized, hey, I got something special here. Stop chomping on the community. By the way, during the fires, I was out saving his brother's house. Person I battle with in my own community because of money. And he looked at me and went, whoa. Whoa. So we have to figure this stuff out, folks. Okay? We're creating problems. We're not solving problems. And I'm hoping this is on video, and I hope Zach Friend here says, by the way, Mr. Friend, I've been to meetings before where you bullied the other supervisors. And Mr. Cummings, I please hope that you don't let him do that to you, because I saw him bully Mr. McPherson, and I was brought up, you don't disrespect older people. He disrespected that man. Okay? He's not a good person. What he's trying to do is placate the money. Now, this community, we do have people with money, and I hope they hear me too, because they have lots of influence if they want to get involved. That's all I have to say. And thank you for doing what you did. Thank you.
Okay, we're winding down. I guess we're done. Oh, Justin,
one last
yeah.
thing. I just want to thank all of you for all the comments tonight. And I do want to make one little plug, because it actually, sitting here, occurred to me, which is that one of the biggest concerns you all have is public safety. And I just want to remind you all that the sheriff is also an elected official. So in addition to telling us, the Board of Supervisors, I think it's really important that you reach out to your sheriff as an elected official and you let him know your concerns. And I'll also point out,
Justin, I spoke with the deputy assigned to patrol, sheriff. I tried getting the sheriff. That was as close as I could get. He apologized. He said, please don't think we don't care about you. We have no money to get more resources to handle any of this. We're doing the best we can.
and I understand that, but sending letters, because the sheriff can also send a letter to us in opposition. There's nothing stopping them.
Hasn't done that?
I don't think there's been enough people reaching out with their concerns, because I'll also point out, today was our second day of our budget hearings. Today was the public safety, the continuance of our public safety budget, and the sheriff's budget was on there. There was no increase in budget or line item related to increasing patrols or public safety around this ordinance. So that's another thing just for you all to take with you, is that there's the potential for a new program to come on board that's going to significantly increase the number of people that are in your community, will significantly increase the potential for calls for public safety. And the county has not increased any funding to help try to address that. So I just say that because it's not, as another elected official, he's supposed to be responsible to you all, and people can apologize and say there's no money, what have you, but it's like, but we want you to do something, we want you to say something, we want you to stand up for us because we elected you to represent us, just like you all elected me to represent you as well.
Thanks, Justin. So, and I should say one last thing before people take off, and how indebted we are to Justin and staff. If Sandy hadn't reached out and gotten in touch with us 5 days before the March Planning Commission meeting, we wouldn't even have been aware of this ordinance. And that's different from the cannabis was around so long that everybody was aware of it. This was like a stealth ordinance, and if Sandy hadn't gotten in touch, we wouldn't have been there for that March meeting.
Thank you, guys.
So thanks. Okay, thanks for everybody attending. We'll be in touch.
I'm not for it. Yeah, I don't understand.
Steve, this has your, Steve, this has your name on it.
And I am not ashamed of my position, and I'm willing to jump right off there. If you ask me. And I have no problem. So give me a call. And your name is Nancy? Huh? Nancy Tillian. Yeah.